Trump's trade war has backfired in a massive way, and the numbers tell the story. Canadian buyers, once the biggest group of foreign investors in U.S. real estate, are walking away in huge numbers, with searches plunging 20% compared to last year. This isn't a small dip, it's a full-scale retreat that's ripping apart a multi-billion-dollar economic link. The cause? Trump's reckless tariffs and confrontational trade policies. Canadians have long been the top foreign buyers in the U.S. housing market, accounting for 13% of all international purchases and pouring nearly $6 billion into American real estate in 2024 alone. That's a critical economic pipeline, now collapsing because of short-sighted political maneuvering. So how did Trump manage to sabotage a relationship with America's closest trading partner? And why should Americans care? Because this isn't just about houses. It's about trust, trade, and the long-term damage of policies that put politics over prosperity.
Prime Minister Modi go to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit that took place in Tianjin 2 weeks ago, which was clearly, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and India getting together to thumb their nose at Trump. So I think what is interesting, it's an admission on the part of Trump that he needs help to achieve his goal. And I think there is an opening for Canada and allies to say, okay, if you need our help, well, let's work together. But we need to be clear on what exactly we are trying to achieve here. And for instance, we would need a clear confirmation on the part of the U.S. that they would provide security. They would give security guarantees to Ukraine to prevent further invasion from Russia. But we need to...
The former Canadian ambassador to China recently exposed what's really happening behind the scenes. Trump's diplomatic blunders have left him begging allies to shoulder the burden while he dodges any real action himself. According to the ambassador, Trump hasn't raised tariffs directly on China because he knows Beijing would strike back instantly, cutting off exports of rare earths and magnets critical to the U.S. Instead, he's pressuring Canada and other allies to absorb the economic fallout while he claims political credit. The decline didn't appear overnight. It began the moment Trump took office and started issuing tariff threats. Canadian interest in U.S. homes plunged as early as February after the White House slapped a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. The real collapse came in April, when Trump doubled down on his trade war strategy. That month alone saw a staggering 34.2% year-over-year drop in Canadian real estate searches, the steepest decline on record. A third of the Canadian market vanished in just 1 month. Realtors are feeling it firsthand. Heather Mahmoud-Clay, a Redfin premier agent in Phoenix, said she usually works with 5 Canadian clients every spring. This year she had none. 0. And Phoenix isn't alone. The collapse is nationwide. Canadian searches for U.S. properties have fallen in 46 of the 50 largest metros. Only 4 saw gains. The rest watched their foreign buyer base evaporate. The hardest-hit cities paint the clearest picture of Trump's economic failures. Houston saw Canadian searches collapse by 55% in May, Philadelphia by 53%, and Chicago by 47%. These aren't small vacation towns. These are major American hubs losing massive international investment. Florida, long the top destination for Canadian buyers, has been crushed. West Palm Beach saw a 26.6% drop in August, while Tampa 23.1%, and Orlando, 23%, joined the top 10 worst declines. Florida, once the crown jewel of Canadian real estate investment, is now bleeding buyers. And the consequences go far beyond statistics. Agents report Canadians are walking away because of political tensions. One Las Vegas agent shared a story that illustrates the damage perfectly. A client who once owned 4 Vegas properties catering to fellow Canadians is now selling his last U.S. home, saying he no longer sees America as a safe or attractive place to invest. This is the real result of Trump's America First strategy, driving away America's closest allies and top investors. Far from making America great, he's dismantling economic ties and poisoning relationships. The collapse in Canadian real estate interests is part of a broader breakdown in U.S.-Canada relations. Tourism at Niagara Falls State Park has declined since the start of the year. Cross-border traffic by car is also down. At the same time, Trump's tariffs are hammering Americans at home. Builders say tariffs already add $9,200 to the cost of constructing a single home. So not only are foreign investors pulling back, but U.S. families are also facing higher costs. The construction sector is being squeezed on both ends, rising costs from tariffs and falling demand from international buyers. Economists warn that tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber will only push costs higher, discouraging new home construction at a time when affordability is already at crisis levels. Canada, too, is hurting under Trump's policies. Sales of condos, townhouses, and other housing dropped 10.4% year-over-year in February. New construction fell as well, creating a vicious cycle where Canadians can't buy at home and won't buy abroad. What's striking is how quickly relations soured once Trump took office. As soon as tariffs were announced on January 20th, the gap between this year's home sales and last year's began widening, and it hasn't stopped. The damage was immediate and devastating. The human toll is undeniable. Canadian trust in the U.S. has collapsed. Only 22% say they have confidence in Trump, compared to 52% who trust Biden. Trump's inflammatory talk about Canada becoming the 51st state has only fueled hostility. Former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau even accused Trump of trying to trigger Canada's economic collapse as a step toward annexation. The ripple effects are devastating. Realtors who built their careers on Canadian buyers are watching their business disappear. Marcia McMahon-Jones, a Redfin premier agent in Palm Springs, says she hasn't worked with a Canadian buyer in over a year. Potential clients are telling her they'll wait until U.S.-Canada relations improve. Meanwhile, in Ottawa, the fallout is reshaping politics. Opposition parties hammer the government for its weak presence in Washington. Prime Minister Carney says Canada is now prioritizing trade with Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America, rather than relying on the U.S. Trump's hostility is literally pushing Canada to diversify away from America. The construction industry faces a perfect storm. Tariffs drive up material costs. Immigration crackdowns shrink the labor pool, especially damaging since immigrants make up nearly 30% of construction workers. Fewer workers plus higher costs means fewer homes built and higher prices. Add the loss of Canadian buyers, and it's a trifecta of Trump-made incompetence. The tragedy is that all of this was predictable and preventable. Canada has always been America's closest ally and biggest real estate investor. Trump blew up that stable, profitable relationship for short-term political points. The numbers are stark. Canadian searches for U.S. homes are down 20% overall, with even sharper drops in markets like Phoenix and Palm Springs, traditional hotspots for Canadian snowbirds. The economic impact stretches far beyond sales. Canadian homeowners spend millions in U.S. communities on property taxes, renovations, and tourism. That money is vanishing. And don't be fooled. This doesn't make homes cheaper for Americans. Canadians typically buy in markets with excess supply or luxury segments, not starter homes. Their absence doesn't free up affordable housing, it just drags down market activity and property values. The lumber market shows how reckless Trump's tariff games have become. Canada supplies 85% of U.S. softwood imports, but Trump slapped tariffs anyway, sending futures soaring before backing off and causing prices to swing wildly. That volatility hurts both U.S. builders and Canadian suppliers. Meanwhile, Canada is spiraling into its own crisis. Unemployment has risen to 7.1%, GDP shrank 1.6% in Q2, and productivity has fallen. With only 32.8% of workers covered by employment insurance, the lowest since 1941, job losses are pushing families toward foreclosure. Trump's trade war is wrecking real lives, not just numbers. Canada is fighting back. Prime Minister Mark Carney is pushing tens of billions in new housing investment to insulate the country from Trump's tariffs, promising to build for Canadians. Ironically, Carney's rise to power, replacing Trudeau, and heading into an election this April, is itself a direct result of Trump's disruptive policies. Trump hasn't just damaged the economy, he's reshaped Canadian politics.
Of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs as they begin to hit the Canadian economy. Here's a look at some of the latest data points to underscore that. The unemployment rate in August ticked up to 7.1%. That's the highest level in 4 years. The Canadian economy shrank by 1.6% in the second quarter of the year. And during that same period, Canada's productivity dropped by 1%, the biggest plunge in 3 years. These trends will likely factor into the Bank of Canada's next interest rate announcement Wednesday, as well as this fall's much anticipated federal budget, which the Prime Minister has said will be one of both austerity and investment. So, can the feds achieve both? And what is the biggest threat to Canada's economy right now? With me today is Business Council of Canada President and CEO Goldie Hyder. Next to him, Najoud Al-Maliz is an economics reporter for the Globe and Mail. And rounding us out today, economist and Atkinson Fellow on the future of workers, Armin.
Canadian officials are now actively pivoting towards stronger trade ties with Mexico and other partners. With American trade disruptions growing worse, Ottawa recognizes the need for new strategies. The focus on integrated sectors like autos, where parts and vehicles cross borders dozens of times during production, highlights how Trump's crude tariff approach ignores the complex reality of modern supply chains. Rather than working with him, Canada and Mexico are aligning their policies to work around Trump. Meanwhile, Trump's tariffs are pounding through supply chains like a jackhammer, shaking business confidence and balance sheets on both sides of the border. Canadian homeowners are bracing for the fallout: job losses, higher prices, and housing market instability. With mortgage rates uncertain, consumers are pulling back from big purchases, especially real estate in both Canada and the US. The latest Redfin data shows just how deep the damage runs. Canadian interest in US homes dropped 26% year-over-year in May, the fourth straight month of double-digit declines. This isn't a seasonal dip. It's a sustained withdrawal happening right in the middle of what should be peak buying season. The traditional spring surge was muted, in large part because Canadian buyers vanished from the market. And this is no localized issue. Redfin reports fewer Canadian searches in 48 of the 50 largest US metros. Only Indianapolis and Austin saw growth. Everywhere else? Sharp declines. That's not a correction, it's a collapse. The construction industry is particularly exposed. Small businesses, which make up 80% of the sector, run on thin margins and are least able to absorb rising costs. New home construction, already squeezed by labor shortages and disrupted supply chains, now faces even higher material costs from tariffs. These small builders are the backbone of American construction, and Trump's policies are cutting them off at the knees. The irony is impossible to ignore. Trump promised to help American workers and businesses. In reality, higher construction costs mean fewer jobs, fewer projects, and less growth. International investment is drying up, and strained relations with our closest ally are erasing opportunities across multiple industries. Even Trump's own administration has been forced to delay and reverse tariff rollouts, admitting through their actions that the policy isn't working. The housing data speaks louder than spin. In August, the number of Canadians searching Redfin for US homes fell another 19.5% year-over-year. That's not fake news. That's hard market evidence. And yet, the obvious solution, ending the trade war and restoring normal relations with Canada, is one Trump refuses to consider. Instead, his ego and blind faith in tariffs keep him doubling down, while billions in investment vanish. The economic fallout is spreading into Canada as well. The unemployment rate in August rose to 7.1%, the highest in 4 years. GDP shrank 1.6% in the second quarter, and productivity fell 1%, the sharpest decline in 3 years. These trends are already shaping the Bank of Canada's next interest rate decision and looming federal budget, which the Prime Minister says must strike a balance between austerity and investment. The Canadian real estate exodus is just one example of how America First has become America Alone. By alienating allies and dismantling partnerships, Trump is weakening the US economy, not strengthening it. Realtors know it. Builders know it. And the housing market numbers prove it. Trump's tariffs haven't made America great again. They've made America more expensive, more isolated, and more vulnerable. The 20% drop in Canadian housing searches is only the start. If this path continues, expect even more damage to trade, investment, and industries that depend on global connections. The question is no longer whether Trump's policies work. The data is crystal clear, they don't. The real question is how much longer America will allow him to keep breaking vital economic relationships before leadership with real competence steps in to repair the wreckage.